Okay, so good afternoon. I am Anto Budiarjo. This is Monday Live. This is something that we do every Monday afternoon to figure out the future for smarter buildings. Um, our profiles are listed on mondaylive.org, just in case you're wondering who we are. And just to make a point here that views expressed here are personal, not of any company or organization. So keep that in mind and do post questions, comments on the Zoom chat to make this as interactive as we can. And this slide deck, if you want anything from it, is available also on mondaylive.org right there on the homepage. So good to have you with us today, which is President's Day. So maybe a little light today, but we've got stuff to talk about. So this being February, we are talking about operational technology this month. And our agenda for today, our normal chit chat, and then we're going to talk about operational technology, but we're really going to talk about what the scope of breadth of OT actually is. We don't really think about that too much, so we're going to do that this hour, and then have some interesting discussions on that. We're looking forward to that. But before that, Ken, what's going on, Ken?
Lots going on. The main thing is we try to define what automated buildings is, which I think is probably something we should do, because we've evolved to this online cloud community library supported by the industry for the industry. So from our presentations at Chicago, we've created a short video, and the board actually gives us a little bit of insight into that. So anyway, that's all there if you want to move through. We also thank Scott Cochran and Cochran Supply for all the support they give us, and SES and a few others that have been helping us immensely get this library concept off the ground, and seems to be working out great for us. The other one is Nicholas from Sweden is one of our contributing editors, and Nicholas spun this idea by, and I thought it was kind of interesting. He's created this superhero called the CDO, which is the Chief Data Officer, and then he morphs that as a service. And that's kind of an interesting concept, I think, is because we've all been talking about how important the chief data officer is, and I'm not sure many companies have one, and I'm not sure many companies can actually afford it, but they probably could use one as a service. So that's kind of an interesting concept. And also Nicholas and his digital twin are off to Dubai to see what's going on over there. So I kind of like watching some of this international stuff, because eventually it does kind of filter down to us. And he actually gave us a shout out that some of the stuff that we had identified several years ago, that there's $1 trillion opportunity in real estate. You know, just no matter what's going on with it, we're always retrofitting it, and we're always part of that action. Another one of our contributing editors, James McHale, is doing a live stream on AI. I forgot to mention that I just said it was a free live stream, but if you actually click on it, you'll see that it's about AI. Oh, there it is, artificial intelligence and machine learning in commercial buildings and technologies. And it's on the 29th of February, which is an interesting day to have a convention. I guess he won't be having an annual one. The other thing two things that have popped up is some of our Canadian banks have identified themselves as they're willing to invest in infrastructure, and energy retrofits are high on their list, and anything sustainable. So that's kind of a support from the banks. I think that's an interesting trend. And then we have now have the YouTube online from Chicago, the evolution and implementation of AI in the BAS industry, which I think is a good hit. for today's session. And of course, that was led by Tracy. And we had Troy from Passive and Keith and Cochrane basically commenting on that. So yeah, it's should play well into today's sessions. Back to you, Anto.
Thank you. On that CDO, that's kind of, I agree with you. It's interesting. I do wonder if that as a service part of it, don't CDOs, if somebody is looking after, responsible for the data in your company, wouldn't that person have to have an enormous amount of domain expertise on that company? So how do you do that as a service? That was kind of the only thing that went through my mind.
I think the gist but there's, I mean, if you got a great big company, that is absolutely true, but there becomes a bunch of stuff in between where
right.
The data is becoming more important than the company, or as important as the company, and some people just don't have those resources. And that was an interesting idea. I think it's just it's in the early days, so it's just opening up some discussion.
Yeah, just focusing on the data as opposed to what the data is really what you're saying, which is really interesting. Okay.
Have you seen a company that has a CDO?
I don't know.
I have not.
I can't remember one.
I absolutely have, and I've also have my co-founder was in a kind of CDO role as a consultant, deploying ERP systems, enterprise resource planning, like SAP for firms like Hallmark Cards and Levi's. And there are definitely the baseline thing is understanding what is the workflow of the organization and what is a data framework that you can create around the data of the organization. And with the concept of formalizing a workflow and the data, then you can start to explore the business intelligence and tools you can build on top of what the existing workflow is. But the other key aspect to it too is data security, obviously. And so having a fractional CDO, to me, it would make sense if they're embedded for a year, not like doing it a week out of a month every month, because you need to stand it up and start getting the workflow and tools in place and inventorying everything. So I could see it fractionally where it's full time for a short amount of time, not fractionally for a part of, your 40 hours a week each week.
I think the big message is we need more superheroes.
Yep.
I've encountered a title, Smart Building Officer, that data part, which Nicholas is talking about, falls under the realm of this Smart Building Officer. I've actually seen it now, I don't know, in about 8 or 10 different scenarios, usually in larger enterprises where they've adopted smart buildings as a part of their operation, and combined with the data ownership within the organization, along with sustainability and energy and all the latest buzzwords.
Okay, cool. Let's move on. Well, it seems that everybody's going to the cloud because this news came across my desk this morning. I wonder if anybody on this call knows any more about this.
Oh, who knows? Who knows? For us, just like everything, we've been involved with the cloud for several years, but where we're seeing it is the continued role that cloud and cloud technologies, and whether it be IDB or whatever, is taking more hold. And for us, it's all about part of our continued strategy from the edge to the cloud. So it's nice. We added a couple people to this group now, and it added a few additional offerings and enhancements. So we're looking forward to y'all hearing more about it, as it continues to progress.
Thank you. That's great. It's great to see that. Look forward to updates going forward. As a reminder, the Smarter Summit video, the full video is now up on YouTube. It's on this link here. It's 2 hours, 45 minutes long, but it's actually split sections as the segments of the Smarter Summit. So if you want to see what actually happened there, head over in that direction. The other thing is that we're starting to do some planning for the Realcomm Smarter Summit in June. We have some calls coming up in the next couple of weeks, so we're all looking forward to that. Community link board as normal, just various links that you may want to use. Other than that, any other band thoughts or news anybody want to bring up?
Here's one, and again, obviously cyber and cybersecurity is always on all of our minds each and every day. And that two companies, I'm not going to mention who they are, suffered or experienced, cyber issues, and the combined total of monies that cost them, and again, $76 million that cost each of those companies. They were a little bit different. One was 49 and the other is whatever the difference is. And again, I don't like to mention names.
Is that actual cost to repair, or was that lost business?
That is what they assigned it to, is repair, lost business, lost brand, lost everything, but $76 million. And that, where I'm going with this is that it's one thing to talk about, making all of us things cyber secure and everything, technology solutions, but don't forget the business ramification as well, because that's just as important. And obviously they're both public companies. They have to report them under the new SEC ruling and so forth and so on. But that's a lot of coin, 76 million.
It is. Any other thoughts? Okay, let us move on then to operational technology, and we're going to talk this week about the scope and breadth. And so I thought I'd just put up an obvious list of what OT is likely to sort of mean to a lot of people. Starting from HVAC, because we're HVAC people, so we put that at the top of the list. But I would imagine somebody from security and access would not put this on the top of the list. Just sort of an interesting point. I think you've seen all of these. I think you'll understand all of these. And the other list that I think is sort of just as interesting is this list on the right, which are things that are maybe not as obvious. But I would argue it's actually as much of a issues to do with the operational of a building and everything that's going in it. And one way I was actually just looking at this slide earlier today, that sort of you can think about this, is that the list on the left is really related to the building itself, and the list on the right is really related to what happens in the building. It actually is not the building itself, but what happens in the building. So I don't know how that fits into all of our sort of models of OT, but I just thought I'd put this up as to get people thinking. And obviously these two lists is not complete, and there's lots of things missing. I'm sure you will come up with that, but I'll bring this up and start the conversation. What thoughts do you have about breadth and scope of OT? How big is OT? Who wants to start?
I'm happy to keep you.
I'd actually. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, David.
Okay, I would just like to be, before we get to OT, when I look at this list, there's one crucial application that's not in there, and that's a calendar. And locking automation, we talked about this, I think, a couple weeks back, or I'm not sure when, but on a number of projects I've been involved in, we had tied the automation of the systems to a scheduling calendar for the spaces. And so when a gallery is booked in a museum, the systems would be operational, the HVAC would be in its occupied state, etc. And when it wasn't booked and it was during the day, it would be in a standby setting, and then overnight, you know, depending on the time of day, it might go to the overnight setting. So I know we're talking about OT here, but having a calendar to tie all of these systems together is really a crucial way to think about it and conceive of that automation. So thank you.
Which then puts calendaring or scheduling, which is really something that is common to everything, to both the people and the
Exactly.
building and the equipment. It
Yeah.
sort of synchronizes or coordinates it on that dimension, right? On the time dimension, which is could be
Absolutely. And the other thing too, I would comment on this list is security should actually be broken into access control versus video surveillance, because they're usually two very separate systems. And it's really the access control and the badging that can unlock so many of the smart and automated functionality. So I'd break those out too. Thanks.
Yeah, and again, what's sort of interesting about that is that you raised the point as to those things and how they relate to everything else, right? And a badge actually is more than just something that can get you into a building. It actually identifies you, so there are actually more potential value that you can get out of that system in the whole operational.
Exactly. When we get to the thinking around interoperability, the calendar and the access badge, or you know, access control systems are absolutely crucial. And I've done projects where we've had the badge be used for vending machines, for the point of sale in the cafeteria, for the fitness center, for parking, for elevators, for lighting control, for booking rooms, and for AV systems. So it really can be a gateway with the calendar and the access control systems to doing everything.
Yeah, point I'd
Project-
like to make is that every one of these items, in fact, has an OT to support it. So HVAC needs an operating technology of maintenance, very skilled people to keep all of that stuff working. Same thing with lighting. And so every one of these, like we kind of, and often what we're dealing with is the result of operating technology, and we're combining it in our cloud presentations and our IBBs. But underneath every one of those line items is the necessity of having an operating technology and a chain of command and a chain of maintenance and a chain of a whole bunch of things just to keep all of that working. So I think if you kind of look at the tentacles of this beast, it's very, very, very broad.
And I would actually argue that it goes deeper than that, because each one of these bullet points is actually an industry in its own right. Right, and not only do they have the issues that you raised, but they also have rules and regulations and standards that's strictly pertaining to that. You know, I'm looking at fire and life safety. We understand that very, very clearly, right? So, in a way, each of these bullets is the silos that we keep on thinking should be broken down, and maybe we can come back to that conversation.
Operating technology is complex. I think we all try to make it simple, but it reaches right down to the very bowels of absolutely everything we do in our industry.
And I can't stop myself, forgive me, but we also need a property management / ticketing system. Because from the operations team with property management, engineering, etc., you need to be tracking the work orders, you need to be tracking the regular maintenance and all of that kind of stuff. And that should be tied into every one of these systems in some manner for tracking, potentially tracking alarms and alerts from systems and event management as well.
Yeah, I think, David, I need to sign into that as I look at the list. Kind of on the left and the right, you've got kind of hard and soft. You've got perhaps before and after occupation. You kind of say that the ones on the left are common in most buildings, whereas the ones on the right tend to be tailored to the occupier. I mean, obviously they could be put in general, but a lot of that is soft on the right, but it's all over and about the operation of the building. Obviously the hard parts on the left are core to the environment, the operations of moving people around and security people and so on. Whereas the right tends to be the functionality of the people in the building. But it's a unique opportunity for the facility management and the maintenance management of the buildings. As you said, David, you can, with the connectivity now, you can provide that real-time IWS, integrated work management system. So any information from any of it can go away and actually generate works orders and automatically get people on site to fix things or prevent things from happening, because they should be getting smarter, obviously, to do that. But for me, there's very much a split here, but it's all about when you combine them, the day-to-day running of the building. But the right is more about tailoring towards the occupier. The one on the left is the fundamental part of it. Yes, some of it does. You've got to modify the operations to suit their comings and goings and the way they actually lay out their buildings. But the ones on the right are very specific in terms of things like visitor management and that kind of thing, and inventory management. And as Anto said, there's a whole long list of those things that could be there, but they're all those soft services that sit on top of the data that's been kind of shipped out to the cloud for people to actually manage their building function.
So one term that is not on that list, and I was actually thinking about putting in that list, and I couldn't figure out whether it goes on the left or the right. And then I read out a bullet, so I didn't put it on. Is facilities management. Is it a bullet, or is all of this facilities management?
I think all of it's facilities management. Think of the words, facilities management. It's actually managing the whole thing. And there's an opportunity for the facility management to do all of this stuff, whether they're actually, capable or, broad enough to do it. Some of the bigger ones you would have thought would be able or want to provide space utilization and visitor management and so on. But I would have thought it's all to do, literally, I think the heading partly is, facility management. Yes, it's providing data for them to be able to manage the facility.
And so is facilities management the same as OT, or is facilities management the use of OT, something like that?
Second to me, yeah, the second one is it's the operational technology which enables the facility management.
Right.
I don't think you can do facility management, maintenance, or whatever without.
Right.
Mm.
And
Yeah, unfortunately, Ando's not here. He would be jumping in at this point.
Exactly. And I kind of look at this a little different. I think the list is very comprehensive. And again, to run buildings, you need that. But I guess where I'm coming from, and I'm looking at this, is that let's look at this year and maybe going into next year. How has things changed? We've discussed this on numerous shows before. or whatever, but how has all of that list you've got there, which again is excellent, how has those either independently or together have changed? In other words, how has the problems, or what are the problems that we are supposed to be solving today? How has it changed, those problems changed over the last couple of years? You know, when I talk to building owners and occupiers, they tell me great technology everybody has in our industry, but I'm all about efficiency. 2024, it's all about efficiency this year. How does OT contribute to solving the problem of efficiency or property values? I have to maintain the value of my properties. We know it's going down. I've got to try to help and create property value or things that contribute to that. Same with like resiliency. And then the fact that one of my biggest things as a property owner is I don't know on any given day how many people are going to be in the office and where they're going to be located. You know, most people, as we know, have adopted a 3-day work week, but now that's changing. People are saying, and you know, owners are saying you got to be there, or businesses, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, take Friday and work remotely. And again, it's a moving target. And then ultimately, I think you talk to the people we all market and sell our stuff to, is they're expecting all of this operational technology to do a lot more than what they have grown up having it. So that's kind of how I see this thing.
So I'm looking at the comment that Christopher Atkin just posted. And I was actually sort of thinking in kind of in that direction. And I was going to sort of, one of the things is in a way, the challenge or the stuff that we're talking about isn't necessarily a new bullet, but isn't it how to make all of these bullets work together? The data in these the data that's in these bullets, which we've talked about as being, you know, certain disciplines and industries, to make them work together so that the owner and the occupants, whoever's actually benefiting from the building, can actually benefit from all of them working together, rather than just having independent silos that are just doing their things separate and not actually working towards the benefit of the owners and
I'm
occupants.
going to modify that and say they need to work similarly. Because if I'm an owner, if I'm running a building, I want to be able to use the same tools to be able to query and maybe adjust. I want to be able to use the same approach across all of them as much as possible. So I'm just getting picky here. It's not that this system needs to work with this system, although that's probably where it's all going. It's like if they work similarly, if they work in a predictable way, that's a really good step in the right direction.
That's why we brought out Div 2525 and the Smarter Stack. It's basically to solve this problem.
Maybe. What a great strategy.
And what you said, Rick, how is that any different than if we were having this conversation 8 to 10 years ago?
Because making them work similarly was really, really hard in the past. And new tech, and that's one of the things, is like we've had tech around each one of these silos that's been okay, right? You know, it's been better than operating in blindly. But there really hasn't been, and there still maybe isn't a single tech that makes all of them work similarly. But data standards and this thing called the internet is really, and iPhones has really started to drive people's imagination of, why can't I have things that work in the same way, in the same environment, predictably, on the same sort of platforms? And that's Now, eventually these systems, I think, all start talking to each other, and that's going to be scary. You know, and they start borrowing information from each other, and they start exchanging value from each other without us knowing. But right now, just having them work similarly, I think is what we're trying to do. I also wanted to say, to put some context around it, you know, I mean, these numbers aren't correct, but just for the heck of it, I mean, you can write them down on your whiteboard. There's about 90 billion square feet of commercial space. I mean, that's malls, retail, office buildings, schools, church, you name it, 90 billion. And if we just use logic, we know that operating those and the budgets for operating buildings is about $30 a square foot per year. Now, the systems that then manage that spend is what is on this page. So the 90 billion times 30 is the cost. And then it just makes sense that people who own buildings or run buildings will apply technology, some amount of technology. How much? $3 a square foot? So you can actually quantify the breadth and the scope of what we're talking about here.
And I agree with that, Rick, and I think it's an exciting journey. But I think you also have to understand that a lot of where we are today is the immaturity of the people in the right-hand column who did not do their proper due diligence. A lot of these startups and others that have brought many of these value propositions to market to see how they would actually interoperate. So as Anto said, a lot of this stuff was developed on a vertically focused basis. And people, especially in these small startups, didn't have the history or perspective to understand how they could get into interoperable systems. And Anno has talked about this many times on the program, is how the latest IoT startup has come up with a closed-ended value proposition, which is neither interoperable nor sustainable. But, you know, as that market squares out and as people go for that $3 a square foot, they will begin to understand, you know, tools that we've put in place like the Smarter Stack and Div 2525 to evolve their products into that condition. So I just think it's a 10-year evolutionary process for people on the right-hand column to do their due diligence and understand how to build sustainable systems instead of, you know, a piece of eye candy in one particular vertical market to get some sales, which is where they had to start, right?
I would
And
guess,
pursue-
Jim, yeah, I was going to say, Jim, I guess some of them on the right have been around for a long time. When you look at CRM and supply chain management and retail and POS systems, it's just they never had the connectivity and the potential. Yes, of course, there is all those startups on the space and visitor management and things like that, but it's a bit of a mix, I think, there on the right of old established type solutions that are now having to get their hands around being part of a real-time live information type system where they, you know, do have access to more data and expectation.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess I have a chance to weigh in here. So with regard to the left, a few years ago, I was involved with a project up in New York City with a major firm. And just to give some context, at least from a breadth perspective, about the number of OT systems, that facility, they have 20 different, what they categorize as OT systems. So the obvious things like HVAC lighting and security and video surveillance, but that's 4, now 16 more on top of that. So I think one thing to recognize is that over time, automation has increased in all aspects of what it means to run a building, and as well as the features. So people tracking wasn't really prevalent 20 years ago, but it's I wouldn't say it's overly common, but it's being asked for. Monitoring the cleanliness of bathrooms wasn't asked for until COVID started coming along. So there are, I just think our industry is inclined, if you will, to continuously evolve the sophistication of the things, of the mechanical electrical, and people-related systems. But based on just the way things work. So, visitor management, you can think of it as an application, but you still have to have a terminal to log in as a visitor. Okay, so there's invariably, and you may end up with a badge as well, right? So there's the physical aspects of these systems, as well as the software aspects. And from a software standpoint, we focus on the interoperability for sure. And as it's already been pointed out, all of these line items is essentially a silo, and arguably will continue to be a silo. And yes, we have some large players in our space that have grown through acquiring multiple pieces of the silos and try to sell that as a package. But to think that that's going to be the way the industry ends up, I don't believe so. I think it will continue to be very independent oriented largely, right? And no one company is going to do everything. Now, as I think has also been pointed out, the facility management companies are in a strong position to try to affect how all of these systems run if they can. But the challenge, as we've been pointing out for a long time, is how do you get them to easily and cost effectively interoperate, which is what led to Div 25. It's led to the specification of the IBB, to our conversations around Haystack and other ways to model data. All of those things are answers, if you will, or potential solutions to getting all of these different things, whether they're software or hardware and software, to better and more cost effectively interoperate. Because that, at the end of the day, there's no way to predict how, well, other than the price tag of a building, really, and the size of the building, how many different OT systems a particular customer is going to have. It's going to vary from a handful to, like I said, 20, and probably, in 25 years, it'll be maybe 30 or 40 systems in some of these buildings. So, so I think it all comes, OT is, I think, Anto, what you've done here is correctly identify that it's both the, if you will, the hard aspects and the soft aspects, or the data only systems, like inventory management. I mean, that's really just a software package at the end of the day. Whereas smart displays, digital signage, I was involved with a project, I don't know, 8-9 years ago that involved digital signage as a connection into the building automation system. So that's nothing new from my perspective. So again, it all comes back to what can we do to facilitate the ability to facilitate that all of these types of systems, whether they're control oriented or data and management oriented, to more easily and more cost effectively interoperate. That's to me, the one and only objective that I see when I talk about OT is, the scope is big, it's getting bigger, but the fundamental challenge remains, and we are working to try to help drive standards and thinking around that.
One of the things that I always hear when people ask me what I do, and I talk about integration and beyond HVAC and into things beyond HVAC, lighting and security, they always say, like what? They always want a simple example that will blow their mind, that will sort of change their world. And it's always hard to answer that question. Not quite sure why I said that, but it's just, does this list help in sort of why would you want, for example, the health system interface, whatever that is, to talk to the energy generation and storage?
So, okay, when you say health system, to me, what I think of are, in a hospital, I think of all the equipment, medical devices in the hospital, and they're on a network, and they're an asset, and the nurses want to know where the hell they are. And so what the nurses do to make sure they have one available on their floor is they take one, they put it in a closet, they lock it up. Because they want to make sure they have it when they need it. Okay. Because they can't trust that it's going to be something they can find when they need it. So but it's a device, it's networkable, and you can tie it into a common operator interface. There's no reason why you shouldn't be able to do that, but it's not always easy to do that today.
But I think also, Anto, sure, you wouldn't have all the lines going to all of them, but you'd actually be drawing numerous lines across to numerous places across on the right when you start looking at, visitors versus lighting, HVAC, that's occupation, and just like Steve was talking about, asset management into the health system. So there's probably a lot of lines. Not every line is, is joined to the ones on the right, but there's a lot of it.
Yeah, and even points within the left or within the right, right? Between bullets on the right and the left. And Greg Powell just made a good example: wheelchair asset tracking, LoRaWAN or whatever technology.
Yep.
So if we can identify the lines in this slide, obviously this slide is not complete, so it has to be a complete version of it. If we can identify the lines, then would they not define the sort of the use cases or where valuable things could happen between these silos? And is that a sort of a good way of trying to figure out what's actually valuable in this? I was gonna pass that to Rick, but he just left, so I guess I won't.
Well, it sort of is, to me, almost like SmarterStack 2.0. It would be fascinating to take any one of these things, fire and life safety or elevators, whatever, and start to draw the lines, right? For example, should elevators be tied into the building automation system? And so why? What's the value? And should elevators be tied into the asset management system? If so, why? Right. So you can be a valuable, and you could almost at that point take that discussion and move it into 2525 use cases within 2525, for all of these things. So because I just assume that everybody knows, like you said, Sandro, I'm not even sure how to answer the question when somebody asks me. Right. Well, the people on this call and the people who are attending this call, I know have been asked, are doing various aspects of this stuff right now. And if we were to make an effort to collect those thoughts, that information, and if you will wire it up, that would be a really, I think, a valuable document.
Yeah, just commenting on Chris, the comment that Chris just put on chat. Struggling why we want to figure out this spider's web of use cases. I think the point of the exercise, Chris, is just to understand what they are. And the second part of your comment is the right way of doing it. They should be able to self-discover each other. But because we don't have an idea of what the obvious lines are, it's sort of difficult to figure out how to do that. I think that's the reason for bringing this up. It's not to actually draw all of the lines necessarily, but just to understand what's actually useful in connecting these dots.
And don't forget, there's a lot on both sides. You don't have to have them going across. They can actually be within the column that they are there. When you're looking at space utilization, and then that ties in HVAC and lighting, only putting in what you need, then you get the energy management and what you've got to generate to provide. So there's a lot of links that go down vertically as well as horizontally.
And the other point is that these lines that we're sort of drawing in our heads as we're talking about this, they have different values. right? And one of the reasons of actually thinking about this is to understand which ones are actually really valuable to more people, maybe in different types of buildings, etc. So there is a benefit in actually understanding what the shape of these use cases are, what the shape of these connecting lines are.
And also, of course, the function, what is it for? Is it to save or make money, or is it to just make sure people have a better environment?
Well, that's why we have the purpose line at the top of the Smarter Summit.
Exactly. Right.
Why?
Exactly.
So what else is missing from this list, or what can we learn about this list? Is there anything in this list as industries that are not headed to the cloud?
Well, to answer your first question, I think having a corporate directory is typically, for larger organizations, the thing that's required. And when you tie into a calendar like Outlook, you also get the I'm blanking on the name of their back end.
Azure.
Come on.
Azure.
No. That's the cloud.
Active Directory.
Active Directory. Yeah, AD. So usually having an AD type of element, I rarely see CRM systems. It's usually Active Directory and calendar systems. The other thing is audiovisual and room, unified communication systems, video conferencing systems. I've frequently seen integrated, as well as room scheduling. And the room scheduling ties to the calendar and sometimes visitor management. And then also, in addition, you do have point of sale. To me, kind of inventory management is very similar to on the left-hand side, where you have space and asset management. Because typically it's an SAP system that manages both inventory and any assets, and I would combine those. And smart displays, on the right-hand side, I would combine with the digital signs and displays as one element. And then on the left-hand side, there is energy management, and you do have on-site energy generation and storage. Which one of those would be the grid interactive element, or is each one of the systems on the left grid interactive independently?
Point.
Yeah.
I didn't put the grid interactive activity on the list, which should have been.
Yeah. And where's analytics while we're at it?
So
And what
I
about,
remember a long time ago when I was at CSI TAC working with Anno, we actually did an exercise similar to this, and we came up with this list, and it was a pretty long list. It was 90 something long, the list. And then right at the end, somebody says, "You're missing something. There's one thing. It's actually not on this list as well." People.
what about
humans.
decarbonization? Would that be
No,
separate?
people, humans.
Oh, yeah, no, but I'm saying to add to your list, sorry.
Yeah, that was one.
Decarb, and then.
Decarb, ESG, yeah.
And then what about, irrigation? Is that part of water management? I don't think it is.
No, not really.
But we're getting a lot of talk about irrigation, controlling.
Yeah.
Irrigation.
And EV's not on here.
Yeah. So you can go
There's more,
on
but
and
not
on
on.
and on and on, at the end of
Yeah,
the
but
day.
and people, remember, people should be
Yeah.
on here as well, because
Sure.
Right. People
Absolutely.
tracking. Yeah.
no, I don't mean people tracking. I mean just people. I am
Yeah.
here in this building.
Mhm.
I am as much of a thing in this building as a vending machine. I mean, I don't quite mean that literally, but I have some interactions with the building. That's what I mean in the same way.
Well, that's where the user personas come into play. And you have operational user personas, and then you have tenant personas, guest personas. It all depends on the market segment. But in past projects, we've usually done those user profiles and did a day in the life of each one and how they would interact with all the different systems.
So the other part of my the question that I raised, how much of this is not going to the cloud? Or is that a silly question?
I think it all depends on the person who designs the system where they want it. Is it all 100% cloud? Is it combo, local and cloud? Is it whatever? So,
Yeah, the cloud will always have a very specific meaning, I guess, to these industries, these silos. I'm just looking at the vending machines, right? What has vending machines got to do with the cloud? Well, obviously, the cloud system can manage vending machines so that they know when to fill it up and that kind of stuff, and to empty the money if there's money. So there's always an angle. There's always a cloud angle of these different silos. And maybe that I'm just sort of looking for opportunities of sort of connection or commonalities between these things, and maybe that could be seen as one. What do you think, Ken? Is this all about operation? When you were doing operations back in the 70s, it wasn't as big as it wasn't as broad as this, right?
Yeah, but the thing is once you head off and get into one of these, just the HVAC it's pretty easy to get lost into there. Then there's this big education process that he who runs OT has to then understand some of the problems of maintaining HVAC and lighting control systems and lighting systems.
Everything. And everything else that's on this list.
Yes, and it just keeps going out, and the training that the people who touch and work in the OT industry, they need to have training, and we have pieces of that. Like, we're training people at a rapid rate to use these OT systems, but I'm suspecting we have a bit of a problem in the fact that they don't really understand what the OT systems are, the information that's getting brought back to them to try and interpret. I always found that one of the things that I added value was I would look at a screen and I always saw something completely different than somebody else saw. I saw a chiller temperature, I saw an evaporator temperature that was like, whoa, you better do something with that. And somebody else didn't even see that because they'd never worked on a big centrifugal and they didn't know that was a problem, or they didn't see it surging, or you're just about ready to surge, and stuff like that. So because of knowledge from operating, somehow we have to close that gap, and I don't know how to do that in any easy manner except experience.
But I hope we're not saying in any way that people that's involved in OT has to be an expert in all of these domains, because that'll never work. I don't think we're saying that, right? Why would a vending machine engineer need to know about the VAV? They wouldn't, right? There's absolutely no reason.
But they need to be able to reach out to somebody who can provide that function.
Right. That's the interoperability at the human level.
Yes.
That needs to be replicated at the technical level.
So what they
That
really
goes
do, they need a resource person attached to every one of those line items.
And in most cases, though, Ken, it's probably going to be a third party. Wouldn't you agree?
Or an AI.
Yeah. Okay. But I mean, it's not going to be an employee of the building in most cases, because they can't afford to do that. But one thing that we haven't mentioned that was very much an issue when I was doing more cybersecurity as a full-time is just knowing what you have in your building is the first thing as in terms of how you secure a facility. You have to know what's there. And so you can call it asset tracking, but you have to basically, starting out, typically you have to manually walk the building and find everything that's potentially something that can be communicated to. And then if so, in what manner is it being communicated to? So I would say, I don't know if it's true of all building owners, but most building owners don't actually know what they have in total in their buildings. They have an idea. They may have 50 to 70%, but in all the surveys that I was involved with, invariably things came up that they had no idea were in their buildings. So before you even talk about things being interoperable, just knowing what's there would be a really good start. And so getting things on a common communication platform is an essential first step before you can talk about all the value propositions around making the building more energy efficient, more friendly to the occupants, and so on. In this day and age, you need to know what you have so you can not only manage your assets, but you can protect your assets from a cyber perspective.
But, you know, I kind of agree there, Steve. It's a little bit why I was talking about the Wawa gas stations and things. Last week, you know, the vending machines, they connected them all up. They had the vision. It's much easier to envisage if you've got a small operation, but it embraced a lot of the stuff that you see on the left. And they were looking at the vending machines because they wanted to know whether, okay, it was more of a cooling cabinet, but whether the door was open. But then if someone was going to site to actually look at something, was it because there was a power failure? Had someone left the door open? Did it need topping up? Would I have access if I got to site? And that's dependent upon a lot of the stuff that you're looking at on the left as well as, you know, above. So I think having access, and they gathered the information, but then they passed it out to their providers to get themselves a better service, like the gas itself, and said, hey, just come around when I need it. Don't come around every week if I don't need this one and that one, and so on. It's to make their operations and make it much more cost effective and efficient.
That was basically cross silo, cross bullet points. We have interaction, which we're trying to make them interoperable in this sort of conversation.
I think another one is to one of the greatest skills of an OT person is to quickly recognize what they don't understand. They're seeing information that's been brought back to them. They know that it's in trouble, but they don't know exactly why it's in trouble. And to be able to reach out to someone who can provide that expertise and a network of expertise quickly. And as you mentioned, AI helps, but AI is eventually going to not have enough data to answer the problem, and they're going to have to get that expert who knows exactly that you need to turn the screw to make that problem go away. Yeah, so it's a big communication. I think trying to put together a communication network that reaches out to actually operating all of these bits and pieces. And of course, every building is a unique snowflake, so that's a problem.
Yeah. Okay, I think this has been a great conversation. Jim, do you want to summarize, recap a bit, and then we can wrap the show?
Sure. I think that we've identified the need to really look at these interoperable applications. My takeaway is a lot of the work that's been done on the Smarter Stack and Div 2525 creates a nice foundation for us to socialize a lot of these ideas with people working on the applications. And as we move forward with the IBB, potentially we can look at that as a platform for how this information is shared. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Jim. All right, let's bring this to a wrap. Thank you very much, all. Thanks for all those that attended. And we'll get a video on YouTube in the next couple of days, and we shall see you next week. And have a great week, everyone.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.